Wake the dead.
Wake the dead! Wake the dead!
With Sean McCann. Greetings and welcome to Wake the Dead. Today, we are privileged and very happy to welcome returning guest Jerry Marzinsky. He has had at least 40 years of a career working with schizophrenics, mentally ill patients in prison settings, in clinical settings. We had a very long interview discussion about schizophrenia and the effects of schizophrenia. And everyone can look up that episode, I believe was number 59 of Wake the Dead. And everybody should give that one a listen. It's very informative. And we learned many things that Jerry hasn't said in other interviews. And I'm very delighted that you shared that on my show here. And welcome, Jerry. And also we have Anonymous, a gentleman that has come to give us firsthand experience of this phenomenon. And welcome to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Hello.
I guess I'll roll here.
Okay, please. Yes.
You know, one thing that we're doing here is, you know, the establishment and the psychiatric mafia does not give schizophrenics a voice. Matter of fact, they take it from them. They ignore them when they say, you know, listen, these voices aren't hallucinations, they're very real. They're ignored. You know, not only are they ignored, they're drugged silly. And schizophrenics have been trying to tell the psychiatric mafia for decades, these voices are very real. They're not hallucinations. You know, oh no, they're hallucinations. We say so. Based on what? Nothing. Right. Absolutely nothing except their arrogant attitude. They've done no research on it. They just go, oh, this doesn't make sense. So it must be a hallucination. So schizophrenics are suffering auditory and visual hallucinations because their brain is broken. There's a chemical imbalance there, which is a complete friggin' lie.
Right.
They made this up. The pharmaceutical industry made this up to sell drugs. When they came out with Prozac back in the 70s, they go, oh, well, we dump a drug in the body and it appears to get better. So it must be some kind of chemical reaction that we're fixing to do it. I mean, there is no evidence of a chemical imbalance in the brain of schizophrenics or any of these other people. It's completely made up by the big pharma, you know, deep state pharma in the industry.
Right. And we spoke on our earlier episode about how these drugs are a control mechanism to control and subdue the acting out of these schizophrenics. They're not trying to heal anything. They're just trying to lock their brains down to control their actions, correct?
Right. They don't make any money curing anything. They don't know how to cure anything because they don't know what causes schizophrenia. You know, so they make up all these things. So it was a genetic defect. It was a chemical imbalance. It was the mother. I mean, you go through the generations of it. It's like every 5 or 6 years they come out with some new thing, which they have no proof for. You know, right. And since the pharmaceutical industry's got so much money, they control the media, and they're still pushing this chemical imbalance thing even today after it's been disproved over and over and over. They're still pushing it. You look at their ads and it's, oh, it is believed that there's a chemical imbalance
right.
in these drugs, you know,
right.
So they switch their narrative a little bit to be slimy about it.
And people can believe anything, really, you know.
Well, when you turn on your TV set, you know, look, it's drug right. commercial after drug commercial after drug commercial. You know, so big pharma controls the medical schools. They control what they teach. And back in the, I think it was in the 30s, is, you know, the deep state took over the medical institutions. They, right. The Flexner report, I think it was, where Rockefeller and some of his cronies got together and go, medical schools will teach pharmaceutical medicine, or they can't license anybody.
Right.
So
total takeover.
Total takeover. And from there on out, it was drugs, drugs, drugs. They bought off Congress. You know, they bought off everybody. they get a lot of money for this, and
they're still running things now.
and they're still running things now. We look at what happened with this virus bullcrap, all backed by them.
Yeah,
They've made trillions of dollars over that. They could
now
care less about you.
they're medicating the healthy over and over again. I mean,
Yeah, they're even medicating dogs and cats. They go and they're giving them the
Yeah.
same dose as they do humans. It's
Crazy.
pathetic. People need
just
to wake
goes to
up.
show that they treat us like animals.
Yeah. So they don't make any money by curing anything. So after studying schizophrenics for some 40 years, it's clear that these voices that they hear run fixed, repeatable patterns. Hallucinations don't do that. So what this is like, if you have a big magnet, you have a magnet in your hand, you can't see that magnetic field, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it. For all practical purposes, it doesn't exist for you. You only know that it exists by the effect it has on the environment. Okay. Schizophrenia is the same way. These voices that are parasitic entities, you only know about them by the effect they have on the person's internal environment and external environment. So we've composed a list of 20 or so of these patterns that these things run. Now, if you can reverse these patterns, all the voices disappear and the person returns to normal.
They lose their power.
They lose their power.
They disappear.
These patterns have to be run. If you can, and that's how I started off when I was studying this stuff. I'd throw a monkey wrench into one of the patterns, and I was working with prisoners. I'd say, okay, try this and come back in a week and tell me how it's done. What it did. And there was year after year after year of that, where I'd throw a monkey wrench in one or more of these patterns. And when you disrupted them enough, the person started getting better. And then reports started coming in from the person saying, the voices are really getting pissed off at you.
Right. We spoke in their other episode about how the voices planned on killing you. They said, "Who are you to interfere with us?"
Yeah, with our way of life.
Creepy. Yes.
Yeah, that was creepy. That blew me away.
Yeah.
So they don't like this.
Right.
They don't like it.
So you're taking up arms against these. So you're fighting a battle with these guys.
Well, it is a battle. You have to fight back. The schizophrenics.
It's a spiritual war.
It's a spiritual warfare, and it helps to have some tools. So you can go to our website. Those of you who families of schizophrenics and those suffering, go to our website at jerrymarzinsky.com and go to the blog and the articles section, and there's things you can fight back with there, which will help a great deal.
Right.
And
it's not electroshock or medication or anything.
No, it's fighting back against the voices. What you can do to fight back against the voices.
Beautiful.
You have to take your power back. They're like bullies. They'll kick you, knock you down, and just kick you. Just keep kicking until you get up and fight back.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to briefly go through a list of these patterns. And these are for virtually all schizophrenics. These voices run these same patterns. First of all, they're consistently negative. They virtually say nothing positive. It's all insulting, abusive, destructive, bad stuff. And you ask yourself, well, why are they consistently negative? And then secondly, what holds them to these negative patterns? There's something that doesn't let them divert from this negativity. So they're not like regular hallucinations that are all over the place. Some are positive, some are negative, some are awful, and everything in between. These are consistently negative. They're anti-religious. They don't want the person going to church. They don't want them reading the Bible. They don't want them talking to preachers. They hate the 23rd Psalm. I've had several patients tell me that reciting the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown onto a hot frying pan. So what kind of hallucination would be adverse to religion?
Exactly.
That makes no sense, but it's so. Right. So you don't believe what I'm saying, check it out for yourselves. Those of you who have schizophrenic family members or you work in clinics, check it out for yourself. It's right there in front of your eyes. All you got to do is see it. They foster and create negative emotion. All of this abuse, all of this anti-religious stuff is all aimed to creating negative emotional energy, which they then drain off. So if you talk to schizophrenics and ask them, how do you feel after the voices attack? They're completely drained. Yet they have no energy. It's been taken from them. Now they don't realize that because of the pandemonium associated with the voices. You know, it's like, oh, I'm feeling bad. The voices are screaming at me. They don't hardly notice that their energy level goes to nothing.
Mhm.
So they energetically drain their victims, but they have to turn their mental state negative before they can take the energy.
So
You know, they,
that if it's a positive if the person is radiating positive energy, the voices can't attack, they can't feed on that.
oh no, they'll still hit you, but
Okay,
it's like it wouldn't be a feeding frenzy.
I see.
You know, so yeah,
So it's almost like blood in the water for sharks when you.
blood in the water for sharks. Yeah,
Mm,
and the more blood in the water, the more sharks. So
I
they're
see.
attracted to negative emotional energy.
Right.
So they're attracted to people with lots of trauma. You know, emotional,
Interesting.
physical, and sexual trauma. That
That's
they
go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, they just get sucked right in there. But they hit us all. You
Right.
know, so you may be wandering down the sidewalk and all of a sudden you have this thought, you know, hey, jump in front of traffic, or you're standing on the bridge and the thought, yeah, well, why don't you just jump off? Those
Wow.
aren't your thoughts. You know, we're taught from a young age to believe that all our thoughts are our own. That's far from true. And that's what
Mm,
these things want. So
They're testing.
they're testing. Exactly.
wow. To see how much power they have. If they can
Yep.
deceive you into thinking it's your own voice, then
Oh
they
yeah.
have you.
They want you to think those thoughts are yours. You
They're
know,
trying to find a way in when they're testing you like that.
yeah, and I've seen them where they start off with pick up this pencil or go sit in that chair, or you know, it's like a guy getting
Something
into
simple. Right.
a new car, trying to see how much control he has over it.
Mm,
You know,
wow.
so that was strange.
Wow.
Yeah, so they get louder after sunset. You know, and you go to old folks' homes, they have something called sundowner syndrome, where they all after sunset they all start getting crazy. You know, they get
Do you,
louder when ignored. You going to say something?
yeah, I was going to ask, do you think that the elderly are easier to attack? Is their consciousness not as firmly in their
Yeah.
body?
That's my belief. You know, they're
Mm,
starting to fade out.
right.
So
Or
they
maybe
are
the
easier
amount of
to attack.
drugs they're on, because there's a lot of meds in those.
Yeah, they put them on a lot of meds too, but no
Right.
meds or no meds, it still happens,
Interesting.
you know, and it happens after sunset.
Right.
So the
So the
and the
sun it pushes away these
yeah,
voices.
it has
Well,
some
really,
kind of
between 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning is when they're really the strongest.
yes,
People
Really
call those what the witching hour, so to speak.
interesting.
yeah, exactly. You know, between 2 and 4, if they're going to hit you, they're going to hit you then. And usually they start off with nightmares, and then the person wakes up and they start screaming at them. That they don't want
Wow.
you to get any sleep. They want you to be exhausted.
Hmm.
You know, because you're an easier target if you're exhausted.
Right.
Um,
That's why they like the meth heads. So we've talked about that in the first episode about how the meth heads, they don't get any sleep, and then that leads to them seeing more of the shadow people and being more susceptible uh to invasion of these
It's a
voices.
form of brainwashing in a sense by these entities. I'll call them.
Interesting.
yeah, they want you to believe that these thoughts are yours.
Yes.
You know, and if they get caught, then they get punished, which is interesting.
Right. Have
But
they
you
ever
know,
described their punishment?
yeah, they said they were sent to a place called the pit,
Huh.
whatever that
Wow.
is. You know,
Wow.
yeah, they said if you screw up, you get sent to the pit.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know what the pit is. It doesn't sound good. You know,
Probably, yeah,
doesn't sound like
yeah.
a good place.
Right.
But yeah, you know, they insist that the victim not tell anybody about them. So they want to keep their presence secret.
Right.
You know, only to their victim. They can't be ignored because you know, I've heard psychiatrist after psychiatrist say, "Oh, they're just hallucinating. Just ignore them." Yeah, doesn't work. You know, I remember the first time I called up, I heard a psychiatrist do that. I was at the state hospital, and I called the guy back a week later, and I said, "Well, how'd that work for you?" He said it didn't work at all. He said it did the opposite. They got louder. So I
Wow.
started questioning others, and they all said the same thing. If you try to ignore them, they get louder.
Like an angry child. It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, like a throw a tantrum. They did,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, they won't be ignored.
Wow.
So they foster self-destructive behaviors, another pattern. They want you to screw up. and then they want to jump on your face for doing it. You know,
So that would lead to more misery, and that then
yes,
they can feed more on the blood that's in the water. You know, that
yeah,
leads you down a path of more misery, and that they love that.
yeah. I've seen people go off their drugs. You know, we were working for vocational rehabilitation, and we had a psychiatric rehab center at the state hospital. So we would teach them vocational skills. And I'll be darned, you know, as they were approaching succeeding in their class and graduating, schizophrenics would always do something to screw themselves up. They'd shoot themselves in the foot, you know, get thrown out of class, or, you know, discharged, or start using drugs, or do something to get themselves, you know,
Self-sabotage.
yep, to sabotage themselves. And it was so common. It was like, you know, so they foster isolation. They don't want their victim talking to anybody. They don't want them to have any friends. They don't want them to have any family. They don't want them to have any associates. They want them alone in their room with the door locked. So all their attention goes to the voices.
Right. The misery.
You know, the misery.
Right.
And then they just beat on them the whole time. You know, so one of the worst things you could do for a schizophrenic is to let them isolate themselves. You know, this is a battle for their attention.
Right.
The victim has to fight back and regain his attention from these things, because past a certain point, they're not coming back. You know, there's nothing you can do for them except drug these people senseless.
Right.
And these are the guys that go out with the guns and murder everybody. They just shoot people randomly. It's the voices telling them to do that.
Right. And they lose their will to say no to these voices. The voices have total control over them. You know,
well, it's
in
really
some
unusual.
cases, in some cases.
Yeah, in some cases.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but there's always a fight for control, because even though the victim might not know that these are entities, they know something is trying to creep in and take them over.
Right.
So they fight back the best they know how, but they don't have any tools to do it. You know, so that's another reason. Visit my website. There's a lot of free tools there for you,
That's
especially
wonderful.
in the articles section.
Right.
So they're
I'll make
constant.
sure to include the links for people so they can click right here down below this video. So,
Oh, good.
thank
Okay.
you.
They're constantly maneuvering for increased control over their victims. You know, it's just a constant push for more and more control and pushing other people out of the way. They're constantly gaslighting their victims. They manipulate perception. So, you know, somebody might be walking down the sidewalk, they hear somebody laughing behind them, and the voices will tell the schizophrenic, hey, they're laughing at you, they're mocking you, you know, they're putting you down, they're, you know,
Right.
so they warp your perception to the worst
Right.
possible interpretation. They have complete access to the memory of the schizophrenic. They're not physical, so they're energetic entities. They can be in two places at the same time. There is no time for them.
Right.
They don't exist in time.
They live beyond time. Right.
They
Well,
live
they don't
beyond time.
live, right? They just exist, I
They
guess.
exist. So
Yeah.
Alternate realms.
Right. Right.
it is an alternate reality. They can go into the victim's head. They can pull out every rotten thing they've ever done, throw it in their face, and blame them and make them feel guilty for whatever they did to generate that negative emotional energy. So the whole scenario is aimed at generating negative emotional energy. And the medications that the psychiatric mafia insist as the only treatment doesn't stop these things. You know,
Wow.
it's like if you were to get, you know, a bottle of Thorazine and you pour it on a magnetic field and expect the magnetic field to stop being a magnetic field. It has no effect on them.
Right.
You know, the
All
only
it does
effect
is
it has,
damage their body, so they have less control over themselves too. Like even their own consciousness can't control their body at that point when they're medicated that way.
well, after a while. So it's a very slow deteriorating process.
Right.
The phenothiazines destroy the brain. They shrink it.
Yeah.
And of course, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma tried to hide that too.
Right.
You know, it's amazing they're not getting the crap suit out of them.
Yeah.
You know, because half the time they don't tell these patients what they do, what these drugs do to them.
That's true. They don't give informed consent, and they're like a bully, these companies, you know. And we have learned helplessness. We've been beat up so bad by these, you know, and people don't think to stand up to these companies.
No, or the
They should.
psychiatrist, you know,
Right.
here they're drugging these guys to the point where they're drooling half the time and that psychiatrists will go, well, I'm the doctor, I know best.
Right. Everybody
Bull
just
crap,
goes
they know
along with
best.
believing the
Everybody just
authority.
goes along with it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of mothers are going, they're killing my kid. I mean, he's not even the
Right.
same person anymore. There's got to be something else. There is something else. Don't let
Right.
them, you know, fool you.
Yeah.
There are ways
Protect
to
your
get rid of
children.
these things.
Protect your
Yeah.
kids from the
But
doctors as well as the voices.
well, it's
Yeah.
not that those medicines don't have a use. I mean, there's
Sure.
a lot of people that I would not be able to reach if it wasn't for those medications.
Good.
Mhm.
They're a good band-aid for the short term,
Yep.
but not for the long term. But of course, the pharmaceutical companies make much more money in profits if they do it for the long term.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Like what, $34 billion a year just in the US.
Right. And plus, with the long term, they need to have other drugs to combat the side effects that are of the growing toxicity from the first drugs.
Right. So
Yeah.
they mask the toxicity of the first drug with the second drug
Right.
while they're still rotting out your brain with the first drug. You just don't feel it.
Right.
You know.
And they
Um,
start kids young with it. I mean, we could go on and on
Oh,
about this
yeah,
whole thing.
you know, they've got like I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of children on these powerful psychiatric antipsychotic
Right.
drugs now. You
Yeah.
know, oh, they're
There's
a
no
little bit
reason
too
for
active.
it. Yeah, they're too active.
They're a little bit too active. They're causing problems. So
Yeah,
yeah, just
right.
you
They're
know,
not following authority. Drug
right,
them, make
drug
them
them
calm
down.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. Anyway,
So the voices are consummate liars. You can't trust them to tell you the truth about anything. You
Right.
know, and if they are telling you the truth, a lot of times it's for your own destruction anyway. There were lots of prisoners told me that when they ran out of their, you know, heroin or they ran out of cocaine, the voices would tell them where to be and when to be there to get it. And some stranger would walk up with the drug. You
yes.
know,
Yes, I've
The-
heard you on other podcasts where the voices told a guy where to find cannabis growing in a field with it.
yeah, hundreds of
And
miles away.
yeah, he'd never been there and he would have no way of knowing any of this. And he just walks right there because he's following the voice. And it's almost, you know, some people think, oh, synchronicity and magic and like,
No, it's well beyond that.
right, right.
You know,
Yeah.
so they know stuff that the victim doesn't. You know,
Mhm.
and they use that to kind of come in, hey, see what we know, you know, see what we can do. We can really, you know, do something for you. You just go along with what we want and we'll give you this and that and you'll
So
be rich and we'll tell you which houses to rob and you know, you'll have all the drugs you want. And
Oh, they're highly manipulative. Highly manipulative.
yeah,
do you think so? Do you think that's because they also invade the other's brain and they can access all of their information and memories of the other person, and then the two separate voices can share in
no,
another
no, they
realm?
don't work
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
the voices in one person's head do not share any information with the verses in another person's head.
Interesting.
Matter of fact, I was curious about that, and I checked that out. Matter of fact, I talked to one prisoner who had a girlfriend who was also hearing voices, and
Hmm.
those voices never spoke to one another.
Interesting.
You know,
So
they
the
stayed.
sharing of knowledge, the understand that the knowledge of where that person was to go to find those cannabis plants did not
Came.
come from another person's mind somehow. It can't, it was like a,
I, no, I don't know
that's
where.
interesting.
I don't
We
know where
wouldn't
they
know,
got
I
it.
guess. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I don't know where they got it, but they got it.
yeah,
You know,
interesting.
because it was several of them followed the directions of the voices, and there were the drugs.
Wow.
The same thing with when they were stealing and robbing people. You know, the voices would tell them, you know, they wouldn't tell them exactly where the loot was, but they'd tell them the general area.
Sure.
And then they'd tell them where to hide when they're running away. You know,
Wow.
but yeah, if you look at it overall, it's all aimed at their destruction.
Right. Right.
You know? They can manipulate feelings without speaking. So you could be sitting there feeling okay, and all of a sudden this heavy feeling comes over you, and you start getting depressed for no reason you know of. They can do that. They consistently steer their victim away from anything that might generate joy or pleasure or happiness. They don't want the person to be happy
Mm.
at all costs. They will do anything to make that person miserable.
So that's a different vibration that they don't like.
Oh, yeah,
They enjoy the fear and the hatred and the all that
they're
instead.
definitely very low vibration creatures.
Interesting.
They short circuit reason. You know, a lot of times what they'll do is get the person confused and then hit them with a suggestion, just like they do in with hypnotism.
Right.
Some of them are really dumb. I mean, there was one that would all it would do was say, "Hey, hey, hey," and the guy was left wondering whether the voice was talking about hey like the grass, or
Right.
hey like you, hey you.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and he's like, well, what does he mean? And that's all it did. It just tormented him with that.
That's interesting, because some of the voices are very powerful, have very large vocabulary, and
Yeah, very sly.
right. So maybe that is those more intelligent, uh, more able, uh, powerful voices are higher on this hierarchy on the other side. Do you think the lower ones that don't have the power are just like
I don't know what I have.
greenhorns, new?
I'm not sure. What I did notice is usually if the victim is intelligent, the voices appear to be
I
intelligent
see.
also.
I see.
You
So
know,
it's almost like using the victim's abilities.
well, I don't know what's going on there. I just that's a correlation that I noticed.
Okay.
You know,
And
so
if you want to take a religious approach, if you want to call these things demons or archons, I mean, there's all
Right.
different levels and hierarchies and levels of
Exactly.
intelligence among the demons and the archons too. So that can come into play too.
That's why I thought to ask that question, because like with the Goetia of like John Dee's Goetia, I mean, he mapped out this demon has this many legions of other demons below him that he commands under the power of, his authority. And, there's 72 of those. And, and then there's the lower lesser ones. And I'm thinking maybe the one that says, hey, is just, you know,
yeah,
the boot black of the better one, the better demon or whatnot,
yeah, there does seem to be a hierarchy. You
Right.
know, I had one person say that one of their voices were taken away because it wasn't doing as good a job at destroying them as it should have been. That was a
Wow.
female, and that I found that interesting. And another one came that was meaner.
Wow.
There was
So
one
it's
time.
almost like there's some like they're doing a job. They punch in, okay, boss says I'm here at this brain today. Like that's really
Yeah,
interesting. One
yeah,
goes, the other one comes in. That
it's like they're assigned to destroy that person.
Well, it's
very
spiritual warfare.
interesting.
They have their mission. They're trying to
Really?
accomplish their end objectives.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, and let me see, what was that other case? There was one where he had two voices. We got rid of both of those, and he was free for a while. And then he comes
Wow.
back and he goes, there's another one. I said, well, where'd that one come from? And he says, that's their supervisor.
Oh man.
And that one about to leave. He was pissed.
Wow.
I'd like to speak to your demon manager, please.
Yeah, right.
Dial 9 to access the other. Yeah. Can you
Okay, so
imagine? Okay, so please continue your list. This is very informative, and this will give us a base that we can use for understanding when we speak to Anon here and hear his story.
yeah. So they try to pass themselves off as the thoughts of the victim. And a lot of times they sound just like all the thousands of thoughts that go through your mind on a normal day.
Right.
You know, there's no change in timbre or in the sound of it.
Right.
It's in the intent of it.
Yes.
You know, the voice will suggest that you do something that you don't want to do or isn't part of your personality, or
Right.
or something malicious or nasty or you know, or just testing.
That's how you sift out your voices from the others,
Right.
because I mean, you love yourself. You would never hurt yourself. That is, your true self is love, and
Exactly.
they don't work from that. They work from the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
And right. So that's just pay attention to your thoughts.
Right. So
That's
so
very
every
important.
negative thought about yourself or anybody else comes from them. And you know, when you get a thought like that, think about what is its intent? What is its
Right.
intention? You know, it's not your intention to destroy yourself or to get yourself in trouble. You know, then whose
Yeah.
intention is it when you get a thought like that? It's not yours. So where's it come from?
That's right.
They're very good at selective forgetting. You know, so I'll give my patients a list. Okay, you gotta do this, you know, to fight back, and they'll get them to lose the list. They'll get them to forget to do it. They'll tell them to forget to do their exercises. You know, and it's a patient that has to fight back. Nobody can do that fighting for them. They have
Right.
to do it. You
Right.
know, if they don't do it, these things are going to take them over.
Yeah.
They fill the victim with, I would mention this one, negative thoughts about themselves and others. They'll do anything they can to destroy any sense of positive self-concept you have. They'll pull the victim away from consensual reality into this strange reality of theirs. So that's where psychiatry goes, oh, well, they've broken from reality, so they're no longer functioning in the consensual
Psychotic
reality.
break. Right.
Psychotic break.
Right.
Yep. So that means the voice has got control.
Huh. So then they just give up on trying to, they just put him in the corner with medication, tie him to the wall like
or they end up
one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
They end up in prison. That the prisons are the new state hospitals.
Right.
A
De
lot
facto,
of these,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it cost a whole lot more money to keep them in prison.
$70,000 on average per prisoner a year.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
If they could just give that to the person, they wouldn't need to rob anything.
Right. Or if they
Anyway.
put them into a group home or something rather
Right.
than
Of
that.
course.
So the whole thing is prisons are here's these guys that are psychotic in the first place. Then they're thrown in with a bunch of violent sociopaths.
Right.
They spend several years there. Their psychosis gets even worse, more violent. They get more cold-hearted. And then after, their education there, oh, your time's up. Dump you out on the street.
It's almost like it's meant to be that way.
It almost seems that way. I've seen them release people I knew would kill somebody within 6 months.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that guy was going to kill somebody. Oh, his time's up. He's served his step to society. And you think they got any rehabilitation there? No, that's a joke.
No. And they're even letting them out.
For show.
Nowadays they're letting them out before they serve their time because coronavirus. So silly.
Oh,
there was just in Memphis the other day. There was somebody shooting out of the window and they were released from jail. They should have done 3 years. They only did like a year or something. Anyway, that just goes to prove your point. So,
well, okay, I'm done with my thing. I'd like to let Anon talk, and I'll just kind of be jumping in there every once in a while because he's got his personal perspective, and when he brings up a point, that is pertinent to all schizophrenics and not just his story, I'll kind of jump in there and kind of say, hey, this is wider spread than just one person.
Wonderful.
Okay.
That's great.
So I tend to remain silent when Jerry speaks because I'm remembering all the stuff he's saying. He's right on, and I have to give a credit to him as well because the fact that he started to see repeatable patterns. I mean, that goes against his education, his teaching as a psychiatrist, and he had to kind of have an awakening. See, there's something going on here, and the fact he actually applied real science by, oh, there's a pattern here. Let's see if it's repeatable. Let's see if we change things, certain variables, something happens. That's what good science is about. And the interesting thing is nobody tells the counselor to, well, ask the patient what the voices are saying.
Right.
Jerry started doing that. He got in trouble for it. Right. And the way I see it, good science is it should be investigated. You investigate things. So I consider myself a recovered schizophrenic. I had it in my mid-20s. They put me on some of those psychotropic medications that Jerry's talking about. And all that I can say is that they're basically tranquilizers.
Yeah.
The stuff is still going on in your head. It just keeps you appear calm from the outside, but the patient or the target or the victim, I will say, is still dealing with the turmoil of the voices inside their head. And on top of that, those psychotic drugs over time, they rot the brain. They destroy it. So,
Anon, you recovered on your own virtually. Has any researcher ever contacted you to find out what you did to recover on your own?
Of course
No,
not.
I think if you asked every schizophrenic who recovered on their own, if any researcher ever came to question them about what they did to recover on their own, no, not one. Not a one. They make up this chemical imbalance bull crap to sell their drugs, and then they poison people with it. And they go, oh yeah, look, it does calm them down. We can control entire populations with this stuff.
Just like fluoride and all the rest.
Yeah.
So just kind of going in a little bit of my background. I mean, I just really started interacting with Jerry about 3 or 4 months ago, to tell you the truth. I was never a patient of his, but I saw some work he was doing. And I contacted him and said, hey, I've been there. And what you're saying is pretty much right on there. And we've kind of started talking about some of the things that I encountered, and what Jerry's encountered with his years of experience dealing with patients diagnosed with a schizophrenic disorder. So I came from a dysfunctional family. I mean, there was definitely trauma going on growing up as a child in my teenage years. There was a death, drug abuse, narcissism, emotional abuse, some physical abuse, codependency, whole gamut of things.
Okay, and there's another pattern right there. You know, the psychiatric mafia is going, oh, it's due to all this other genetic stuff, chemical. It's due to trauma. You know,
Right.
every schizophrenic I've ever worked with has suffered horrendous trauma, just like Anon is talking about here. It's an overwhelming amount of trauma. That's a one-to-one correlation between that and schizophrenia.
A lot of those traumas are traumas that they put on the whole society too. I mean, they you know, they encourage the domestic violence. They encourage the fathers to not be in the home. They've been destroying the family for many years, since after World War II. You know, the nuclear family, it was eroded down to 2.3, and then they got rid of dad, and then, like, you know, mom is at work. You know,
Yeah,
so like,
yeah,
and every one of these kids is like, you know, not abused as much, like it's a scale, but everybody that's in the society has had to deal with like parents divorce, and you know, they try to drug them at school, and you know,
not
there's
enough money.
levels. Yeah, and yeah, that too, and
Yeah,
the
both
slavery
have to
of
work.
money. Right,
Yep,
right.
yep.
And
And
then
then
the
you
schools come and take the kids, and they teach them all this, you know, anyway.
all this crap. And you look at these patterns, and you look at what the mainstream media has been feeding us over the last 2 years. It's the same entity on a macroscopic scale. You
Exactly.
know, there's a one-to-one correlation between these psychotic patterns that I just read you and what the mainstream media is broadcasting to us constantly. It's the same
Exactly.
thing.
To a degree. I mean, I'm more from the conservative side of the argument on this. I mean, yeah, mainstream media has their narrative, but the stuff you see on YouTube and everywhere else, they have their narrative too, and it's tough because you got to sort through and figure out what is truth. Is mainstream media telling me a true narrative, or is that stuff going on the other news websites telling me the correct narrative? There are conspiracy theories out there, but not everything's a conspiracy theory. But it
That's
is
true.
tough to sort through. It is really tough
But
to sort through.
if you look at, like Jerry was saying, sorting through your own thoughts to see what is the intent, and if you look at the, you know, if you look at the fruits of the tree that's growing, you know, then you know their true will, you know.
Yeah,
And
the
if you
apple
look at
doesn't.
CNN or whatever, you see what they're doing, and you look at Alex Jones and you see what he's doing, and they're at different ends, but they're still doing the same thing,
Right.
you know. And so if you can like find a true-hearted person that's doing it without getting paid, you know, like then you might find, but still question everything, of course, and use logic and reason,
Critical
and
thinking skills. You got to use your critical
exactly,
thinking skills.
totally, 100%. That's very important.
So yeah, I came from environmental trauma. I mean, I was surrounded by drugs growing up 7, 8, 9 years old. I was around cocaine, hash, marijuana, various pills, speed, probably some methamphetamines. I'm saying that correctly. But
Methamphetamine.
methamphetamines. But I didn't partake of it, or I tried to resist it. I mean, it was around me. I kind of valued my mind for future use, and I saw kind of what it was doing to some of the grown-ups around me. I mean, I was offered a drug dealership several times in high school, and I kind of said no to it because I wanted a future, and I felt like education would be my way out. So I was trying to get out of this dysfunctional situation I was growing up with. And you don't realize how bad it really was until you're out of it, and then you look back at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not a normal life. That's not something a kid should be going through. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go to college. My dad had passed away, and we had some life insurance money, so we were able to pay for a college education. So I went for a degree in mechanical engineering, and I took classes on general psychology, comparative psychology, and abnormal psychology. So I was aware of some of these diagnoses of schizophrenia and what they call the DSM, what is it, the Diagnosis
Diagnostic
Statistical Manual?
Statistical Manual.
Yeah,
DSM.
manual. So I was aware of all this stuff, but then I got out of college, and I guess weird stuff started happening. I mean, I'm just getting the tip of the iceberg, but it's almost like I was I finally had time in my life to kind of go inward and see who I was, explore who I was inside as a person. I never got a chance to do that growing up because I was always trying to take care of other people or keep the family going, that sort of thing. And I started to read the Bible on my own. I always wanted to read it on my own just to see what it said without the middleman. I mean, I was baptized Greek Orthodox. I went to a Methodist Sunday school, and I was in a Catholic youth group during high school, even though I wasn't Catholic, but they're very open. But that was kind of the Orthodox view. I wanted to kind of read the Bible on my own a little bit and just try to determine what direction I was going to go in life. And that's when I started to get a kind of very depressed, like something was telling me I was like a failure in life, to give it up, that you're worthless. And it's interesting how Jerry mentioned some of these entities are anti-religious, but all these things start happening when I start kind of reading the Bible intensely on my own, because I never did that before.
That's interesting. Did you think instinctively to blame the Bible for making you feel that way?
No.
It's good.
I don't know if I was reading the Bible and certain things were opening up because I was. I wasn't into occult stuff or anything like that growing up as a kid. I mean, I didn't even know what a cult was, to tell you the truth.
Right, I hear that. And reading the Bible, just want to say, reading the Bible on your own is probably the best way to do so. It's from what I've learned over the years.
Yeah, and we can all interpret things differently out of the Bible. I mean, a lot of it's literal, a lot of it's figurative, and people interpret it differently. What's figurative and what's literal, and we have to be tolerant. There's different perspectives on it. So I started to kind of I would say I was starting to crash mentally, where I was getting very depressed, like something was telling me I was worthless. Nobody would like me. I would never succeed in life. Give it up. I was kind of like considering what path to go in life a little bit, and all the suppressed trauma as a child and as a teenager was waking up too. So all these emotions that had been shut down, suppressed, were starting to wake up. So everything was happening at once. I would say I definitely had a psychotic break, what actually occurred. So I started to get very depressed. I mean, I reached the point where I was only seeing in black and white. Food lost all taste.
Wow.
I probably lost close to 100 pounds. I mean, I wasn't eating. I felt like I wasn't even worth to eat. And there's a lot of stuff going on at the time in my head. A lot of anger, I think, what was coming out, or something was making anger come out. So they put me on lithium for about a month or two, and I couldn't even think. I mean, I couldn't remember what pills I'd taken. I could not even add 2 + 2. I mean, my mind was so overwhelmed
because of the
these,
lithium, or because of the depression?
I think it was coming to the depression and whatever else was going on in my head. So that's the thing. DSM classifies things as like bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, all different things. That's not really what's going on. When somebody's going through these forms of psychosis, you've got a little bit of everything going on, I would say, or aspects from different things. DSM is just used as a manual to be able to put that on insurance code for health insurance reason, or throws it categorizes it, but I don't think it categorizes it properly.
And it's all made up. There is not a single test for any that exists anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was reaching the point that I wasn't sleeping. I mean, there's at times I felt like something was almost taking over my body or my personality. I mean, I come from a scientific background. I have an engineering degree, so I have a very logical mind. But I'd have to say there was a possession or an attempted possession going on. And of course, that goes against the very instincts of what I was taught in college as far as the psychiatric courses that I took. So to deal with what was starting to happen, I kind of went in a state of a split mind, where part of me was the participant who was dealing with all this stuff. The other part of me was the observer, watching what was going on, almost from a scientific curiosity, taking notes, observing the different effects. So these very strong thoughts were starting, telling me I had failed in life, I was worthless, give it up, kill yourself, all sorts of things. I think I reached a point where I wasn't even sleeping anymore. I mean, I don't remember. I think I went a whole week there of not sleeping. And finally what happened, I think my body just started moving on its own. I wasn't controlling it, crashing back and forth. And I think my family brought me to the emergency room that night. They said there's nothing they could do. It's psychological. So I was admitted to a psychiatric ward, a mental hospital, and I was in there for about 4 weeks. This was in September of 1990. I guess I crashed so hard, and I was given the diagnosis of having affective schizophrenic disorder. Now, I remember that they would give me all these different pills and drugs. Like they give you a little paper cup. You take this one. That one didn't work. Take that one. Try this one. Try that one. Nothing worked. And I heard all the stuff Jerry's talking about. Oh, it's chemical imbalance. Oh, it's genetics. And I remember when they said, "Oh, it's a chemical imbalance." I asked them, "Well, what's the chemical baseline supposed to be?" You know, I took
Right.
chemistry. I took chemistry in college, and like, you know, when you have a swimming pool, you monitor the pH. You know where that acid or alkaline level should be. So if the brain is off balance, well, what's the baseline? They just look at you and go, they didn't have an answer for it. Let's put it that way. I think I kind of stumped them with that one.
Because
But
it's
Jerry's
all
absolutely
made up.
right.
Right.
There's
Critical
no
thinking
chemical,
doesn't work with those guys.
there's no point of reference to say, okay, what is the normal chemical balance supposed to be? So they give you all these different drugs. You're like a guinea pig because they don't know what's going to work or snap you out of it. And some of the side effects. I mean, I was on it for a very short-term period, thank goodness, when I was in the hospital. But I remember sometimes it was super dry mouth. There's a couple of days I probably don't even remember. I remember sometimes I would be looking straight ahead. I would turn my head, and it would take a while for the scene to catch up. Like it would shift, go in certain shifting phases until it caught up. I mean, I hated being on those medications,
Wow.
and nothing was snapping me out of it. But I remember for about 48 hours there, I reached a point where I was hearing voices, and it was external of me, I would say. It sounded like men's, women's, and children's voices. It was like a cacophony. So a good way to describe it is if you're ever like in a movie theater or you're at a play and just before the show starts, everybody's having their conversations on their cell phone or talking to their spouse or their kids, their family. That's what it was like. I was hearing all these different voices and conversations that were going on.
These
Now I didn't,
conversations were not interacting with your consciousness. They were just
well,
happening around you.
they could have been. I was taking the approach to ignore them. So I wasn't taking the perspective that they were talking to me. They might have been talking to me. They might have been talking about me. They might have been trying to get in or break in. But I kind of chose to treat it at that point in time, at least, that I haven't been sleeping. This is just like that dream state. You know, sometimes you're about to fall asleep, and sometimes you might hear like a voice just before you fall asleep, like your mind playing. Ever had that happen? I guess not.
I don't know. I haven't. No, I haven't had that happen.
It's kind of when you're in an intermediate state between waking up and falling asleep, and it's like this was going on perpetually for about 48 hours.
Wow.
So I was approaching week 4 of being in the psychiatric hospital, and I mean, part of it is like being in hell. I mean, just you're not in your own control. Somebody else is telling you what to do. They're playing God for you. They're thinking for you. They're telling you what to do. But there were some good people in there as well that were trying to help me out. And some of the nurses were genuinely compassionate to a degree. And as far as you know, you're assigned to, I guess, a psychiatrist. I think you'd see him maybe for 20 minutes a week or 20 minutes every other day. It just wasn't anything that sufficient. But I remember they kept asking what my name was all the time. And I was getting a little frustrated because I was like, okay, they have my file, they have my notes there. Why are they forgetting my name all the time? Why do they keep asking what my name was? And I realized they weren't doing it because they didn't realize what my name was. They were doing it to make sure that I knew who I was. So I think they're making sure that I wasn't having some sort of dissociative disorder or anything like that. And so yeah, I mean, there's some horror stories I could say of what I saw and what occurred in there, but it was not a pleasurable experience. I'll say that much. It's not a place you want to stay.
It was
get into.
It was hell in that you didn't have a control over yourself or your environment. Yeah, you didn't have a control over your own mind. And this sounds like a hell to me. Especially
So
after what you grew up with abuse and trauma, and then it's just continuing more. It's not going to heal you at all. It's just more abuse.
oh, it's adding on to it. I mean, I think probably the best thing could help was a little bit of compassion, and that's what some of the nurses showed sometimes, and that was helpful. I feel like some of the doctors were experimenting, almost like playing anger management on me a little bit too, like literally trying to get me angry or something like that to upset me. And
Really,
that's one thing about.
What did they say to you? What did they?
Well, I remember that we had this one psychiatrist where I was assigned, and some of the other patients were complaining about him as well. But I think his approach was to try and, I guess, aggravate the patient. He was very demeaning, and it kind of made you feel insignificant.
Do you think that was
And
for his own ego because he's just a bad person?
it may have been, or it may have been the particular approach he was taking, because probably he was trying to get the patients to fight back a little bit, but you're afraid to because of the state that you're in. It was tough to tell, but it was not helpful. I will say that much.
Can't imagine that could be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you're not serious. You really were. I think compassion was the best thing. Just somebody treating like a human being. I think it is the best way to.
That's really what will
wrap
heal
it up.
everybody's problems, I think. For
A little bit more
other-
compassion in the world.
That's right. That's right.
So I was approaching the final week. None of the meds were working. My health insurance was about to run out. If something could snap me out of it, I was probably going to end up in a state psychiatric institution. So they decided to resort to ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. Now, I will have to say this, it actually helped me. So what it was is, it's almost like, it wasn't like what you saw in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. It actually progressed a little bit better. So it
By the
wasn't quite
90s, you weren't breaking your bones
I
because
wasn't
of,
breaking bones. No,
Right.
they give you a muscle relaxant, and then they kind of knock you out. It's almost like going to surgery. They give you anesthesia. And the muscle relaxant is so that you don't break your bones, you don't rip tendons during any convulsions that you may go through while they run that jolt of electricity through your brain.
sounds so violent. I mean,
But they have to breathe for you too. They have to put a respirator on you.
because it depresses your system so much that your lungs don't even work.
Exactly. The muscle relaxants are that strong you can't breathe on your own. Now, and they told me that I might have some short-term memory loss after going through it, but there was nothing. The pills weren't working. Nothing was working to snap me out of where I was. But after the very first treatment, I felt better. If you remember the old vinyl records, you know when a needle got stuck in the groove of a record, just would keep playing the same groove over and over again. I felt like the ECT had lifted the needle and put it in the next groove so that the record could continue playing.
Really? So did you resume normal function of your brain and your thoughts?
I felt those very strong thoughts or voices had gone. I mean, there was almost like quietness in my mind. I felt like more as like myself, like my personality was coming back. I had a glimmer of hope again. I felt like, okay, I can rebuild myself from here.
That usually doesn't last, though. The voices don't usually stay away with EC2. They'll go away for a few days and then come back. I don't know if that was your case or not, but that's a general.
Well, yeah. I mean, the voices, they do come back, probably even stronger with a vengeance, I would say too.
When they're with a vengeance, they're angry that they were sent away.
Well, I'll get into that as we go on.
They don't like being electrocuted.
So I told them that I felt better. I said I can start rebuilding myself. They said, no, you need 5 more treatments. So they gave me 5 more ECT sessions. It was every other day for about a period of 2 weeks. So I had a total of 6 ECTs. And one of the times was rather scary because I think they couldn't find an anesthesiologist. So they had to call one off the field. And I guess he was out playing his golf game. And he wasn't paying attention. He was flirting with the nurses, bragging about his golf score that he just got.
And they gave that guy.
Oh, they gave me the muscle relaxant before they had the respirator on. And I'm there gasping because I couldn't breathe. And the nurses pointed to the guy and said, like, pay attention to what you're doing. I remember the guy jumped and grabbed the respirator and put it on me and got me breathing again. And then the anesthesia kicked in, and then I was out. But that was scary. Again, you're out of control. You're not in control of yourself. So you're depending on these other people, kind of taking care of you.
And these people don't care for you. They don't care about you.
So some do, some don't. I mean,
obviously that doctor didn't.
Yeah, I would not generalize all of them. I mean, look at Jerry's case. I mean, he was generally trying to see what he could do to help those patients.
Right. Jerry had care enough to ask them what the voices were saying. Jerry's one of a million.
Definitely. So I was released from the mental hospital. I was assigned a psychologist and a psychiatrist. One was prescribing me drugs. The other one was for dealing with counseling. And I hated being on the drugs. I mean, they put me on Klonopin at the time, kind of a low dosage of Klonopin, which I was told at the time was a mood stabilizer. Now, I was dealing with counseling, but I was focusing on some codependence issues I had with my mother, but there was so much else going on. I think the reason I recovered from it is because I didn't tell my counselor or psychiatrist what was going on, because I was working with it on my own. But after I got out, I started to go through these kind of, I would call them trials or tribulations or attacks. And they're very strong thoughts, and they're like coming out of my own thoughts. It was almost like a battle between, I guess, the angel and the devil on each shoulder, in a sense. But one of these thoughts kept offering me mammon, like a path to instantaneous wealth, power, and riches and fame if I sold my soul or gave up my quest. And these tormentors, they're trying to make a deal with me. Like, and they showed me the path how to do it. I mean, it was from a business model. I would have had to sell my soul to them, in a sense, but I would have had instantaneous riches, wealth, power, fame within a few years.
Wow.
And I had a little bit of religious background, not in the dogmatic sense, but just in the idea that there is something more than just the material realm that we live in. And I remember reading the stories of Jesus Christ 40 days in the desert, and being tempted by the prince of this world and that sort of thing, and being offered all this stuff and turning it down. And here I am going through such a similar type of pattern. I'm thinking to myself, man, I must really be nuts. I'm definitely mad. I mean, Jesus went through this stuff, and who's going to believe me that I'm encountering this type of same sort of energies or entities, as you want to call them?
I believe it.
So I was in an extremely broken state mentally. I was unemployed. I was below poverty level that year. Now, I had some credit cards, so I was basically paying for my bills with cash advances on my credit cards. That was paying for food. That was paying for my health insurance, any of the medicines that I needed. But I'm just trying to get my life established and get back on my feet. So I said no to that Faustian bargain that they were offering me. It was tempting, but I just felt like there was a reason they were offering for me. I felt like if I said no to it, there'd be a better future for myself and hopefully all of humanity. So that attack backed off, and then the next stages occurred. This is probably now approaching, I'd say, maybe winter of 1991. So it was at this point that these very strong thoughts, they would make me feel extreme guilt and shame, almost to the verge of trying to make me end my existence. They were pointing out all the crimes in life I committed, however minor they were. And I was a pretty good kid growing up. I wasn't a major troublemaker or anything like that. So I think they had very little to go on. So I think they were a little frustrated. But they would list every morsel of meat that I ever ate, every fly, ant, or worm that I ever killed, every flaw in my character. One thing in particular, I used to do some fishing as a kid. You got to catch some trout, some bass, some sunnies, and I'd hook the earthworm to the hook to bait the fish. Well, these thoughts started making me feel so guilty. I mean, they were telling me things like, see, you really are a horrible human being. You kill earthworms. What type of being would do that? You're worthless. And it would make me feel so guilty for doing that.
And that's the kind of stuff they say to all schizophrenics. It's almost like they're made from the same cookie cutter. They got the same, rotten stuff that they throw at everybody. The schizophrenics in, 2,500 miles away in Georgia are being told the same things as the schizophrenics here in Arizona. It's like they're all made from the same cookie cutter. It's really weird that way.
Do they always bring up moral issues that you've done? And that's always a moral guilt.
They'll use anything they can to get your emotions turned negative, and there's no, you can't trust anything they say. It's constant lies. It's constant badgering. Anything that will upset you, they'll hit you with, and they can get into your memory, so they can.
They're chastising you, is what they're doing. They're chastising you. So yeah, they use your memories against you, and sometimes they'll distort your memories too. They'll try and blame you for things that you really did not commit or do.
I had one guy where they told him he murdered somebody, and he didn't know whether he did or not. So he well, should I turn myself into the police? And if I do that, I'm going to go to prison. If I talk to anybody about this, and if I did do it, I'm going to go to prison. So they had him in a catch-22. Yeah, stuff like that, where it's constant misery, you know.
And that agony of like not knowing what to do,
Right.
and it just drags out that
Yep.
trauma that they can feed on.
Yep.
You lose your sense of trust in your reality is what's happening.
And that's scary.
And do
So
they try to put you in a solipsistic state where your perceptions are the only thing that's real? Do they try to lead you into that type of state as
Oh
well?
yeah. Yeah, they'll try to convince you that what they're telling you is very real, you know, and they're good at it. I mean, you know, there's some of them you talk to that you almost believe them.
well, there's times I felt like they were actually acting out other people around me, like especially when I was in the psychiatric hospital. I mean, just weird things were coming out of other people's mouth, and it was almost like it came off as being almost psychotic from them, like out of the blue sort of thing. And I don't know if they truly are going into other people and acting that way to get you ticked off, or if it's just that your perception of reality is thrown off and you think it's happening. So it leaves you kind of a state of confusion. You don't trust reality. You don't trust what's going on. It's very tough to find your bearing. So this very strong thought or attack or tribulation was trying to make you feel guilty for eating the meat of other animals. I mean, it's something that I still deal with this to this day to some degree, but I would defend myself
Me too,
against them.
actually.
Yeah, I mean, I would defend.
I try not to. I don't nowadays, but I mean, it's immoral, and we know it is internally. That's why the voices can use that against us, because um, because we continue to, like, a lot of people, like meat eaters, don't look at it that way. They don't see on the plate that it is the suffering of another being. They just see it as food, but deep inside, like your true self knows what is happening. And so
That's
that's
a
why they
whole
can use
metaphysical
that
discussion that
against
we
you.
can spend hours on.
Yeah, I don't want to parse out what's right and wrong, but I just want to say that your internal, your consciousness or your conscience knows the difference, and why that's why they're using it against you, because deep down inside, you know that it is the
It's
suffering.
bothering us. It's an ethical issue.
Yeah, that's why they can use it like the earthworm, like, because it's a moral thing, and nobody wants to be immoral. It's just innate. Humans don't want to be that way, and then they say, "Oh, look how evil you are. You're just like us," like, you know. Um, and I'm sorry, but it's interesting, the Faustian bargain. I didn't say anything earlier, but that is, you say you didn't ever learn about occultism, but that is what happens in the occult when that ritual ceremonial magic, they contact non-corporeal entities, and they're offered this, and they have a bargain, and they do the will of the being to receive benefits in their own life of earthly goods. And in a sense, it, like Jerry says, it does lead to their own destruction. All of the vices and so on. It leads down a path of destruction. No matter, even if you feel good, you're still like falling farther away from your own will and your own control of your own life and that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
there's white magic and there's black magic, the left hand path or the right hand path.
That's right.
In what you look at. And I've been reading more on the occult in the last few years, but I didn't know about any of this stuff years ago when I was going through this thing. So, that ethics of eating the meat of other animals. So these voices would attack me. I call them very strong thoughts, because I wasn't sure if it was my own thoughts or something outside of me at the time. I kept going back and forth. I wasn't sure either way, but I took a religious stance against them. I would defend myself against these attacks. It was almost like a series of trials or tribulations that I was going through. But I would argue against them. I would say, look, God created me with teeth, tongue, and mouth. Do I not have a right to use them? Why is meat made to taste flavorful and provides the most amount of proteinic energy per volume? Why does God encourage other animals to kill and eat other animals for sustenance? I said, take your arguments to God, not to me. And so they would continue kind of attacking me, but they would back off after a little while. But they would still kind of leave me in a little bit of a broken state and just feeling a bit like a horrible human being, like I wasn't worthy of life. So then the next tribulation would occur. The next prosecutor would come on. Now, I don't know if it was all the same entity or if it was different entities. I really can't conclude that either way, but I felt like the words that they used and the nature of their comments were different. So it could be subsets of the same common entity. It's really tough to conclude 100%.
Did they call themselves prosecutor?
No.
Okay.
That's what it felt
That's
like.
interesting. Like you're on trial. That's
They were trying to make it out like it was my own thoughts doing it, to tell you the truth. They don't
right.
want to give me any hint that they weren't. So the next attack, it kept telling me how worthless and pathetic humanity and I are. It said that we're insignificant lumps of flesh destined to rotting, be eaten by bacteria and worms. And I counter argued. I said, we were created that way by the divine hand. We didn't decide the composition of our flesh, blood, and bones. It was granted or forced upon us. Our bodies are not necessarily our design. It's the way we come into this world. So I said in defense of this prosecutor, I said, how can you condemn our form when we had no say or control over its creation? I said, take your arguments to God, for that's where you'll find the answers. Don't badger me with that one. And it was interesting because this stance, it backed off right away.
That
went on for maybe
great.
just a week or two. And I realized, wow, it knew that my stance was strong there. It couldn't get me on that one. So then like another tribulation or trial would occur. And like I said, these could have been different demons. These could have been different archons. It depends how you want to describe it from a religious or metaphysical standpoint. But part of what I was going through, it wasn't like I was just like fighting for my own soul or defending myself. I felt like I was acting as a liaison or a representative or an advocate for all of humanity. Because the next attack kept trying to convince how me and how I and humanity did not deserve to exist. It was as if something had entered my mind and was judging all of humanity based on my experiences. It was using my memories as evidence to try and prove humanity's guilt. I mean, there was times I was actually seeing like cinematographic or like movie-like scenes going before my eyes of things that other people had done to me, war scenes, scenes of skirmishes throughout human history. It's like I was becoming its star witness. It was seeing the history of humanity and our species' derelict and dysfunctional behavior through my eyes. It would replace something from my memory and then say, see, humanity is an abomination. They will never evolve. How can you defend them? And this inquisitor basically kept saying that humanity was a worthless and ignorant creation. And at times I was starting to believe it too, but I said, wait a second. I took on the defensive judgment with them as well. I said, yes, there are some humans that are evil, wicked, and ignorant, full of hatred. They've been encountered throughout history, but there are others that are good, compassionate, kind, and full of love. And I put forth my defense is you don't condemn an entire species, religion, or culture as being entirely imperfect based on the actions of a few. So then I would go on to the next stage of these attacks and tribulations. Now we're approaching probably late spring of 1991. And I felt like I was exposed to some divine knowledge, and it's something I'm still kind of trying to sort out, but it was terrifying. I mean, it was something that I did not feel that I would not trust myself as a human being having access to this type of power and knowledge. It scared me. So I tried to kind of push it away. I kind of said to them, look, I don't trust myself with this stuff. I don't want to know this stuff now. But it would say things like, why even bother trying to guide humanity with knowledge being given to you? They won't listen. They will never change. They only laugh and mock at you. You'll be a failure from the start. And they were also saying, if I ever told anybody about any of these things that are occurring in my head, that I would be locked up in a psychiatric institution for the rest of my life.
And that's common.
That's common. I'd be drugged.
They don't want you talking to anybody about what they say.
So it's like, who do I go to? Do I go to a clergy? Do I go to do I tell my counselor at the time? So I wasn't telling my counselor all the stuff I was going through here. I mean, I'm telling you now because it's 30 years later, and I'm healed enough and established enough that it's not a problem to share those experiences.
Thank you.
And it kept asking me, why do you choose to be a fool? Trying to teach or guide humanity or wake them up. And I said, for the love of humanity. I said, I choose to be the fool because it's my choice. And this is a tough one because, as you know, it's very difficult to wake people up to a greater truth in reality. It's like the allegory of Plato's cave. People don't want to know the truth sometimes. It's more comfortable to go back into the hiding because the truth is scary.
Right.
But it also allows you to go to a higher epiphanic level, I guess I would say. You have to, your old self almost has to die away to come to terms with the newer reality. But the newer reality oftentimes is the greater and the truer reality. So I was exhausted from all these attacks and internal tribulations or trials that I was going through. Because part of me is feeling, okay, there's legitimacy to this. I'm having some divine or spiritual experiences. The other part of me is saying, I'm mad. I'm a lunatic. This is crazy. This is nuts. So the final attack of tribulation kept trying to remove any form of faith that I had. It was trying to destroy any type of religious grounding that I had. It was trying to destroy my belief in God or a higher consciousness or a higher being.
Do you think that's because that was your basis for all the other arguments? Because you were able to fend off all the other ones with your faith in God and the Creator?
It was the whole baseline of how I was able to defend against them. Absolutely, yes. And I mean, they were trying to convince me to commit suicide many times, to kill myself. I mean,
and the suicide rate for schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times higher than the general population, but so is it for psychiatrists.
I mean, they would tell you I was worthless, that you have no point to live, you have no value to offer this world, give it up. And there were times I actually got the pipes together in my garage. I was hooking up the duct tape and to the tailpipe of my car. And I had some younger nieces in my family, and I had a little compassion left in me. And I realized if I did that, it would give them a permission slip to do the same thing if they face some traumatic experiences in life. So I did not want to do that to them. So they, in a sense, they saved my life.
God bless you. God bless you.
And some of these very strong thoughts or hallucinations would come in very dramatic ways to kill myself. I mean, one of them, they kept telling me to climb a electrical high tension, high voltage tower and jump off into the wires and electrocute yourself and hang yourself there. Like they were going for drama. They kept pushing that one on me constantly. So I was exhausted from all these internal battles, these tribulations, these trials, what these voices were doing to me. I was dealing with having been diagnosed as having affected schizophrenic disorder. I'm thinking like, I have no future. You know, where can I go from here? I'm never going to find a job. I'm never going to get out of the dysfunctional situation among the family of my upbringing.
That just adds to the further depression that they're loading on top of you, and it just further spirals you down.
It's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. I keep going down and down and down. And I, as I mentioned, I was at below poverty level at this point in time. I was unemployed. I was just no hope of a future. So I started praying to God. I said, God, you know, the most higher essence of God I could. I said, give me a sign. Give me a sign that you are there, and give me a sign that this isn't all delusional madness in my head. I need to know if there's something much more profound going on, or if this is just plain mental illness and I'm a mad person. So I prayed as intensely as I could for about 2 weeks. And these voices kept telling me that God doesn't exist. Give it up. Religion's is a false delusion, mockery. It's a fantasy that humanity clings on to. There's no such thing as God.
That's common too. That they say that often to a lot of schizophrenics.
So I was praying for a sign. I needed proof if I was to go on continue this world. I mean, like I said, I was at my wit's end. I was at the end, and I didn't care what the sign was. I mean, I didn't say what the sign had to be. If a priest had showed up at my door, I would have accepted that. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses knocking, rang my doorbell. I would have accepted that as a sign.
They didn't.
They didn't though. If a Bible had arrived by mistake in the mail, I would have accepted that as a sign. But something very, very profound happened about 2 weeks of the most intense praying. So this is around autumn of 1991. And I'd say I had a hallucination, a visual hallucination or a vision where something actually materialized in my room one night. Okay, can you all see my slide? Beginning of my slideshow here. So I mentioned I've been praying for God to give me a sign that this is something that I needed to know. I needed to know if I was entirely mad or if there's something more profound going on in my mind. And I didn't care what the sign was, but I just needed something solid to go on. So after about 2 weeks of the most intense praying, I woke up one night, probably about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning or so, with the feeling that there was a presence in my room. It was a very powerful presence. I opened my eyes, I looked around, I couldn't see anything. I looked up and this square ceiling light fixture was there on my ceiling, but nothing was occurring. I just felt like something's in the room with me. And then all of a sudden I start to see like this grayish silver smoke or fog starting to enter the room to the left of my ceiling light. Now it was about 6 inches to a foot below the ceiling. It wasn't actually on the ceiling, but it was actually occurring below it. And at first I thought it was an electrical fire, but I realized it's not occurring where the wires would be going into the light fixture. And I wasn't smelling smoke. I wasn't smelling like something was burning, and the sheetrock wasn't browning or anything. So I realized, oh shoot, I'm having a hallucination. Here I was diagnosed with affective schizophrenic disorder about a year earlier, and now I'm having a visual hallucination. And I'm thinking, okay, well, the curious scientist in me is saying, okay, well, let me see where this goes. I want to see what's going to happen here. So more and more the smoke or fog is filling the room, and it wasn't moving like smoke. It was moving like the way ink would move through water. It had kind of a very kind of weird, surreal movement. I don't know if it was alive or sentient itself, but it didn't move the way smoke would move. And then I started to see like this portal open up in the middle of this fog or cloud that's coming in. And the portal's getting bigger and bigger. And it was kind of oval and oblong. And I could see that the fog was pouring in from the inside circumference of this portal. And it's very dark. I couldn't really see into it. Part of me is saying, you know, I should probably run and get out of my room. But the other part of me is saying, I want to see what's happening here. You know, it's the scientist in me. It's curiosity. So I'm looking in. I don't see anything. More and more of this fog or cloud is like filling up my room. There's this long oblong portal. It's pitch black. I really couldn't see anything in it. And all of a sudden, whoosh, I see these two snake-like or serpentine tails move from bottom to top in the portal. And I'm like, whoa. Okay, what the heck is going on here?
Two snakes. That's what you see through in the middle of this Vesica Pisces of a portal. That's
and I'm thinking to myself, okay, is this some subconscious fear that I have of snakes or something like that? Try to introduce itself, but I'm like, no. I grew up around frogs and turtles. I held snakes plenty of times in my life. My college roommate had a pet boa constrictor, and I used to hold it, so it wasn't like I had a fear of snakes. I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I'm thinking, well, at least it's on the other side of that portal. It's not in my room or anything like that.
That's
Well,
reassuring.
I spoke too soon on that one. So more and more this fog comes into the room, and all of a sudden I see the serpentine movements within the fog or cloud itself, like coming in and out of this cloud. And I'm like, oh great, this thing's in my room. So I was frightened, but I wasn't terrified at this point, because I want to see where this goes. So the whole area filled up, it looked like almost like a cloud, a silverish grayish cloud, maybe some black wisps within it as well. I reached a point where I couldn't really see the portal anymore. It was obscured, almost like the way the full moon becomes obscured behind some clouds. And all of a sudden, this creature comes out of the cloud and goes across my field of vision from left to right. Now, from the side, it looked almost like dog or lion-like, had a kind of a mammalian face and a serpentine body. This is 100% of what it looked like. I remember this very distinctly.
Wow.
Because part of me started laughing to myself. I'm like, great, I'm having a visual hallucination. This is what my mind decides to come up with: a snake with like a dog lion like face on it.
This, I mean, I recognize this from Aleister Crowley's tarot deck. This
And
is so anyway, I mean, is it does it have a name?
well, later on in my research, years later, I'll definitely get more into that.
Very interesting.
You're on cue there. I'll say that much. But it appeared to have almost two spines, two sets of vertebrae, and like the tails were kind of adjacent to each other. And over the last, I've been writing a book on religious experiences from this. And during my research, I came across this amulet.
That's it.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
from the Thelema. This is the what I was talking about. That's on the tarot deck.
Now
Huh.
this is actually, this amulet itself, I think, is probably from, oh, I know, first, second, or third or fourth century, but it actually goes back even farther. What it's referencing, it's actually an Egyptian god called Chinubis, which is spelled Choun. Oh, I'm spelling right, Ibis.
4,000 years old.
Yeah, Chnoubis. So this thing's almost 4,000 years old, but it's also known as Abraxas. It's also known as Yaldabaoth. It's also known as the Demiurge, for those
Wow.
that understand Gnosticism. Now, I didn't know anything about Gnosticism as of having these experiences. As I mentioned, I came from a Greek Orthodox background. I went to a Methodist Sunday school. I was in a Catholic youth group. You don't talk about this stuff in Sunday school.
So
But it
it's not
looks,
from your imagination or not from your memory. You don't have this image in your head already that just bubbled out from your
I researched,
schizophrenia.
great
This you
question.
researched after, right?
I researched after, great question, because I was curious if it was like in some of my abnormal psychology textbooks in college, and I pulled them out, and there was nothing listed. The only thing, and I looked, Carl Jung talks about this stuff too a little bit. And keep in mind, this is like 1990, 1991. There's no internet back then. This is pre-internet days. So this thing comes in farther into my room, and then I see it face on. It looked almost like a mangy cat or a beat up lion.
Wow.
I remember I could see stubble on its face, broken whiskers. It looked kind of banged up, like it'd been in a few fights, like a mangy cat that's been in some cat fights. And from what I recall, its left eye looked like it was scratched, or it might have been scratched or blind in its left eye.
Wow.
I mean,
It
it happened
was
pretty
it
quick.
had one eye. It's
It looked like, yeah, it looked like one eye had been scratched out, like it was blind in one eye.
that's such a cult significance to that. But yeah, please continue.
And okay, at this point, I'm seeing, wow, this thing's like a lion with a snake body. I'm thinking, what else is going to come out of that cloud? A duck and a turtle's body? I mean, I didn't trust myself. I was like, okay, this is nuts. So I was a little frightened, but I wasn't completely terrified yet, because it didn't really look menacing at this point in time. But then all of a sudden, as the face is coming towards me, it changes. It changes into the most horrible possible thing you could think of. It was very grayish, wrinkled, and prune-like. It almost looked like an old man or an old hag of decay. It opened its mouth like a howling, screaming expression, like it was coming to destroy me. So this thing did a shape shifting during this hallucination, as I call it. So for an instant there, every cell in my body was on its highest alert of terror and horror and frightening. I thought this was the end of my existence. I really did. I thought I was going to die, because, like I said, I didn't know if this was a hallucination, a vision, or if this entity really was in my room. So I did something very different. I don't know if it was my own decision or there was a higher thought put in my head, but I had the instinct to, I let go of my ego, and I projected love onto it. That was the only thing I could possibly do, because it was too powerful. I knew fighting it would have been pointless. This thing was way more powerful than I. So I figured if it was coming to destroy me, let it feel the sacrifice of my love upon it. So I just projected love upon to it.
Wow.
So it's almost like it was sending a force. I felt like it was a force of pure evil coming from it, or that's what I was interpreting as. Maybe that was incorrect, but it was definitely tremendously powerful, or of great awe. So I projected love onto it. Next thing I know, it seems to pulverize or disappear or vanish.
Wow.
Now that's very interesting, because schizophrenics who can project love onto the voices, they do the same thing. They run like scalded dogs, if you can do it.
So do you think that's why they feel that why Psalm 23 has like a certain level of the same vibration of this love
Yeah,
that they
yeah,
okay.
they are very adverse to, love or anything positive. I mean, religion, positive spirituality, they don't like it. It's poisonous for them. But if you can project love onto them, it's just like Anon says. They just run like scalded dogs. They're gone. You
That
know,
is
they'll come
incredible.
back. You got to change your entire vibration.
Wow.
That's why a lot of times exorcism doesn't work. It may drive them away for a while, but if you don't change the way you think and get onto a positive spiritual path and stay there, they'll be back.
Wow. So Anon, you just resonated on the opposite pole. He was on fear and you said love, and that love is more powerful. It conquered it.
You're right on there. So it disappears or pulverized. And I was shocked. I admit, I did not think I was going to survive this. I mean, I felt like this creature had actually materialized in my room. And I thought that was the end of my existence, that it was going to destroy me completely. And I'm lying there saying, I'm still here. And the next thing I know, there's a different face hovering overhead. Now, it was a white porcelain-like mask-like face. It was sheer beauty. No, I'm not an artist, so I couldn't really portray the beauty in here. I mean, some people say, "Oh, that looks frightening," but it was androgynous,
I
but I felt
mean,
like it was of a feminine nature. But it was a type of beauty that I didn't think I was worthy to even look at it.
do you
And
feel
I'm
like it's the same being transformed or something else?
possibly. I'm going to just give you my observations, and then probably there's several interpretations that I can go on after this. But I
Okay,
realized
please
that this
continue. Sorry.
no problem. This white porcelain face, it seemed illuminated, and there was fluttering going on. Now, I drew it kind of like wings, but I think there could have been wings in the front or just behind the face, like I have it drawn here. But they were like goldish yellowish wisps behind it, kind of moving back and forth. I don't know if those wisps were strands or ropes that were being cut or released. I don't know if it was part of it, but it's almost like there was this white porcelain mask, and there was like a being of consciousness behind it. And this being of consciousness, it looked kind of like the way you see the heat mirage. I mean, stuff was kind of reality was changing or fluttering behind it, and there was some fluttering going on in the front of it. But I was really focused on this face, and I realized that I was aware of this face in my room, but it wasn't aware of me yet. So I'm just kind of waiting, and I'm thinking, okay, that previous face, the lion-like, dog-like face with the serpentine body that came in my room, tried to scare the heck out of me. I'm wondering, what's this one going to do? Because at this point, it was sheer beauty. I cannot describe how beautiful it was. And part of me felt like, I'm not worthy to look at this. I should look away. This is another realm. I'm a human being. I shouldn't be seeing this stuff. So all of a sudden, it becomes aware of me. And I'm lying on my bed just looking up, and the fog and the cloud is starting to dissipate, but the portal's still there. And we're just staring at each other. And this fluttering is going on, and the fog dissipating. And I think we stared at each other, I don't know, it could have been anywhere from 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds of just staring at each other, but it felt like an eternity. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. And then all of a sudden, the face smiles at me. And it was a beautiful smile of grace. I mean, I could see dimples forming in this white face as it smiled at me. And just as it smiled at me, all of a sudden, I feel this wave of love, joy, ecstasy, erotica, bliss come from it. And it's almost like it was telling me that everything's going to be okay now. You won. You're gonna be fine. And just as all this is happening, I started to have an out of body experience where I'm rising up out of my body, and I'm starting to kind of merge with this creature, this entity. And I just remember, and I say erotic in the sense, not in the physical sexual sense, but in the erotic of uniting spiritually with another being, like we were merging together. And it was a feeling of joy, bliss, and ecstasy, undescribable. I've never had a sensation like that since. I'll say that much. So I'm rising out of my body and I'm starting to merge with this beautiful white porcelain faced illuminated masked entity. And it's going in reverse back into that portal that entered my room. And just as I'm about to 100% merge with this beautiful entity and cross over the threshold into this gateway or portal together, all of a sudden I fall back asleep. Now, I don't know if it was deliberately putting me back to sleep so that I could survive whatever was going to go on the other side. But I thought it was done on purpose. Let's put it that way, because it wasn't like, oh, I'm feeling tired. It's like, boom, I went out. And I remember everything kind of went dark and gray. And then I woke up the next morning about 7 or 6 a.m. I was in a state of religious shock. I didn't know how to kind of process what had just happened. Was that a demon? Was that an angel? Was it something good? Was it something bad? But what it did, it told me that God is real, that the spiritual realms are real. I mean, here it is. I'm having these strong thoughts prior to telling me that God doesn't exist, that there's no such thing as a religion or God or greater realities. And then I had this experience. And what it did is it negated everything that those voices had been saying. You just apply logic to that. Here's something telling that God doesn't exist, and you have a profound vision or hallucination like this. So it was at that point that I would say that the voices started to drastically subside. I was able to heal myself as a human being. I was able to start rebuilding myself. Now, I didn't tell my counselor about any of this stuff.
A good thing.
Because they probably would just prescribe me on new drugs or harder drugs.
Yep.
And this, I didn't want to tell me it was just a hallucination, because it was the only thing holding me together at that point in my life. It was giving me the point to rebuild myself.
Give you like a faith, give you your faith.
It returned my faith to me. Yeah, definitely 100%. Now, I've never had another visual hallucination. Can't talk. I've never had another visual hallucination like that again since that experience. And that was probably when I was, my mid-20s, 25, 26. It was about fall of 1991. So, you take the approach that these entities were external to myself, that they're real. That original entity, the snake-like with serpentine face, could have been the head archon himself, Yaldabaoth. The beautiful entity could have been what the Gnostics call Sophia, could have been an emanation of Sophia. It could have been a Sephiroth, if you refer to the tree of life from Kabbalah. It could have been a benevolent angel. It could have been my own Damien in a good sense, my higher self being rescued or saved. But here's the thing, I had no knowledge of these terms until about the last 3 years. And like I come from, I guess, a generic Christian path, I would say, and then I've had this experience. So I've definitely reading more up on Gnosticism and Carl Jung these days to kind of learn more about this stuff. But that visual hallucination, it saved me. It told me that what I was going through was more than just madness in my head. It truly said it was a spiritual battle. And upon having that vision, I would say that's the point I crossed over from being a mad person and becoming a mystic. Because it gave me the ability to deal with this stuff and not go mad, I guess you'd say. So to Jerry's points, with people that are dealing with schizophrenia or people that know people that have schizophrenia, it's a spiritual battle.
Yes, it is.
They have to treat these entities as real. They're external to themselves. Our college textbooks on psychology like to tell us, no, this is just a mental illness, the brain imbalance. No, there's something more going on here. And I don't know if the best way is to interact with a good shaman, priest, and a psychiatrist. You got to treat the human being as a spiritual being, because this was a spiritual battle. And yes, upon having that visual hallucination, that's when I won. That's when I knew it was over. I haven't been on any type of psychotropic drugs since my mid-20s, when I was just on the Klonopin, and what I encountered when I was in the mental hospital for 4 weeks. There's times in my life I've had certain, I would say, audible hallucinations again, but that's another story. But I'm very well established these days. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been working in the field for years. I just paid off my mortgage last year, so I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. Yay! I have a wonderful family, a wife, a child, a dog. So there's hope for those given the diagnosis of schizophrenia. It's not a life sentence, but it does take work. It is a spiritual battle. Jerry Marzinsky's website offers some of the tools that are helpful for doing that. I think the reason what allowed me to heal myself was partly not telling my counselor psychiatric staff that I was hearing voices,
not trusting them, right?
Not entirely trusting the situation. I didn't want to be totally at their mercy, and not telling about that hallucination. Now, the first time I ever told anybody about these experiences was to my future wife in about 2004, 2005. And she's a practicing Catholic. And the ironic thing is she believed me about these experiences more than I did myself. Because I still continued to doubt myself. I did continue to doubt myself a little bit. But after reading more and more, I realized, wow, these are what some of the Gnostics were talking about.
Yes.
These experiences are what our ancestors went through and dealt with. And I have a very scientific mind. I'm a mechanical engineer. I deal with logic all the time. But logic goes out the window with what I went through. You've really got to realize that there is something more to us than just the material realm. And Jerry's right. These entities, they operate outside of our normal space and time. You could call it the higher spheres. If you want to take a scientific approach, you call it subspace. I mean, there's all different terms we can apply to this, but there's something going on out there. And I don't know the specifics of what's occurring in the spiritual realms, but there is something occurring. There's an upheaval going on these days. I think it's trickling down into the globe as a whole.
Yeah.
And it might be a spiritual war, hopefully coming to an end. I have hope in humanity. I feel there will be a good future. We just have to get through these, as they call the growing pains, I think is what we're encountering right now.
It's so wonderful to me that you chose love. That was your instinct to project love on, and then that's how you won. And that's such a great example for everything, like every other encounter of an archon, like in every other manifestation. If that's what you're resonating, then you're resonating on the winning vibe, you know.
Well, look at all the great sages and prophets of history who always tell us it all comes down to love. That is the greatest tool that we have to start learn how to use it more and more. And healthy love, I'll say, healthy love.
And these things want you to hate yourself.
Yes.
So, Anon, what would you tell all the psychiatrists out there that are telling their patients these voices are hallucinations and there's nothing you can do about it?
You know, I would expect to have had more hallucinations, visual hallucinations since then, and I haven't. And to me, random visual hallucinations would be like, say, bubble gum flying through the air, or balloons, or a clown, or something like that. This is very unique. I think the psychiatrists and psychologists treating their schizophrenic patients need to acknowledge that this is real. And they should actually ask the patient, what are the voices telling you? Give them the tools to be able to defend themselves against them. Tell the patient, look, you got to stand up to these voices. And yes, the voices will get louder when you start defending yourself against them.
That's true.
Because they're feeling threatened, because they're like, uh-oh, they're catching on to us. But you gotta keep the fight going. You gotta defend it. You gotta defend yourself. You're worthy. And these entities, they target people, or they target their victims. It's oftentimes those that have encountered trauma. It's kind of like in high school. Remember how the bullies would know the kid who has the rough time at home and would tend to kind of go after them a little bit? It's the same idea. These entities sense people who suffer trauma in their life, and that's why they try to find their way in. But they'll do it to other people who haven't gone through trauma. They'll test. Just I think those who've suffered trauma have more, I guess, broken fragments in their psyche for them to get in and work their way into it.
I wanted to mention about as you explained the trial, I just wanted to, it immediately reminded me of the Pink Floyd's The Wall. Are you familiar with that?
Very much so.
So in the end, it was a trial, and it was, a creative, expressive being, and they were trying to smash his consciousness down, and he was like expressing what it is to be schizophrenic. And Sid Barrett came to visit during the recording of one of their other albums, and he shaved his eyebrows off, and he was all really fat and weird looking, and like he was diagnosed. He had taken many much LSD and experimental hallucinogens. He was connected to the British version of the MK Ultra,
Okay.
And they were just pumped. His roommate was giving him LSD every day, and he was just I don't know if it's experimental medicines too, or if it was just LSD 25 exactly, but
I think the Pink Floyd song "Wish You Were Here" is about that, right? Wishing he was still there with them, I believe.
Yes, he came to visit during the recording of that that album. There was a description of. So in any case, like it seemed like that he was inspired to depict the description, like the internal battle of a schizophrenic, and the trial that you were expressing, and like you were defending all of humanity. And it seems to me like when I see when I hear you talking about their position on what they think of humanity, it reminds me exactly of the globalists and the eugenicists that are running the world right now, and what they and it seems as though and a lot of them I know are ceremonial magicians. And if you look into Crowley and stuff, he was making contact with non-corporeal beings, and what was the influence? And so are these people influenced by these beings, and because they are telling the world that they're terrible and they need to kill themselves? That's really the main message of the globalists these days. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I believe there's definitely non-corporeal beings out there. Some are malicious, some are benevolent, and it's kind of trying to determine which is which is difficult. So that first entity that came into the room with the lion-like face and the serpentine body was definitely, I would say, benevolent. The second one with the beautiful white porcelain face mask was benevolent. But even the word angel has a duality to it. Some of the angels aren't so nice.
Well, also the voices will fake like they're angels or powerful beings to start with. And then when they have the victim under their control, believing in them, then they turn on them slowly and start grinding them to dust.
I was kind of scared because it's a mask, and like he did, the lion face disappeared, but this other thing has a mask. Maybe it's just wearing a mask now, making you love it.
But here's the thing that threw me a little bit. It was the fact that I knew that white-faced porcelain mask entity was there before it knew that I was there. Like, it wasn't aware that I was there. That was the interesting thing. And you had asked, was it the same entity switching from evil to goodness? And I don't know. I mean, it entirely could have been. It could have been the same entity, two sides of the same coin. That my projection of love had thrown it off base, that it felt something it hadn't ever felt before, and it didn't know how to handle it. And it could have changed into something good. It could have been a demon.
Right. Maybe it was thanking you for not responding with fear. Maybe
it could have been. It could have been. And I call them trials. They could have been initiations for all I know too.
What it looks like.
This is by far the most interesting story I have ever heard. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. As I said, I'm not a priest out there. I'm a mechanical engineer. I mean, I got to live a dual life quite often to keep kind of be in both the secular and the material world, and the spiritual and the divine at the same time. It's almost like if you 1 foot in the material world, 1 foot in the divine. You still got to pay your taxes and earn a wage and clean the dishes, but you still also have to nourish your soul, so to speak. Provide yourself with a spiritual nourishment as well. So you mentioned these magicians and that sort of thing. I mean, is it a bad thing to get into that sort of thing, or is it a good thing, or is it individual?
Well, it's there, like you said, there's a left hand and a right hand path, and the left hand path goes against nature. It goes against the will of the creator. to gain their own personal power, and a lot of those forces will contract with non-corporeal entities to gain power in the material world. They like Jerry said, they have abilities, they have knowledge that they can bestow on humans if the humans do what they're told. you know so like the demon realms do have a hierarchy, and this hierarchy trickles down into the living world. The living follow their will as well, and we can see this in the like we see the fruit of what they're doing. You look at the Pope of the Catholic Church, and he's telling everybody to get the jab. Doesn't matter that it's got
Yeah.
aborted babies
Yeah.
in it. And
Yeah, see, I'm on the opposite of the spectrum on that, but it's okay for us to disagree. That's perfectly normal,
Oh,
as long as we
of
do,
course.
as long as we do it
But
with civility.
right. Well, look with your own heart at each thing, and uh, like I said, or like Jesus said, you know them by their fruits. So that'll help you to decipher what's what. But so there, um, I don't know if white magic is a thing. Like, I know that there is, like, to be spiritual and to have connected with connectedness. um I don't think you have to do ritual magic for that. I think that the process of doing the steps of the ritual will put your mind in a certain space, like a controlled meditation. And I think that is part of it also. I think it's about controlling, like, a lot of the occult is about understanding yourself and the world around you, the unseen world. And understanding psychology is a lot about what the occult is. The shamans, or, well, the dark occult priests of the past they are ancient psychologists, and that's where satanic ritual abuse comes from. That's why, I mean, it's an ancient practice, and it is a hard mind control. They make slaves out of people, and this is learned from observation, and feeding the children to Moloch, and they witness the other children that are watching it happen, and it breaks their psyche into,
It's brainwashing by trauma. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Trauma
Yeah.
is the key for that control, because trauma causes the separation in the memory, because the self doesn't want to face the trauma, wants to save itself from the experience and the memory of the trauma. So it creates a blind spot, and so you don't remember it. It's like your brain's psyche's, it's like a shock reaction, so that it saves itself from having to be so damaged. And like the SRA victims talk about the experience of their going out of body while the trauma is happening, because it's like their little body they can't handle all the pain. um it's really sad.
They have to dissociate from their body in order to get through it. It's
Exactly.
almost like
Yeah.
going into
Yeah.
state of shock in a sense.
Right. And this causes the memory. It blanks the memory away, because the psyche doesn't want to remember that anymore, and with hypnosis they can program it. So this is obviously a very dark path of magic, and it's you don't even have to believe in, like, evil spirits to know that that is a reaction that the brain does. And then if you have no morals, then you can use trauma against people to control them. you know a lot of dark occult are atheists. A lot of them also experience these realms, and they know, it's different levels of Satanism. But the higher levels have described that lion-headed being with the snake body, and the two snake the two snakes is like the tail legs of Abraxas. Abraxas is
Right.
also depicted with a rooster head.
Yep.
And a human body with a whip and a shield, like a flail. And apparently all other gods are afraid of it. Like it's the highest on the totem pole.
Yeah, I don't know if there's different species. I know I can take the scientific approach and call them species. You know, there could be a whole species
Right.
of entities in these other realms beyond the bandwidth of our normal vision and normal reality. Or if Abraxas is a mutable figure that can change forms. You know, I mean that when I had that vision, it changed from the lion face to something very horrible, to the hobgoblin type of face. Same idea. Maybe Abraxas can be either have the rooster head or the lion dog-like face, depending on the situation of its target.
So the second face of the gray, scary old hag also had one eye as well.
Yeah, I mean that's. I would say. I mean,
it was just scratched out. Not like it was gone.
It looked like it's scratched out, but it could. I wouldn't say the eye could have still been there. I mean, it was almost 30 years ago that that this occurred. So I mean, some of the details are not that solid in my memory. Like for example, that view I showed you of the creature first coming out of the cloud from the side, that's 100% accurate, because I remember laughing at it, how ridiculous I thought it looked. But as far as the details of the face and the eye, I could have sworn that that looked like something. If there was a big scratch right here, I remember, and it looked like it could have possibly even been blind that eye from that scratch or that impact.
So if you look at a lot of the satanic music and culture, a lot of these people will cover up their left eye, or what? Maybe it's the right eye. They cover up one eye to like show, hey, I'm in the group.
That's the sign, huh?
Yeah, it's one of them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it's news to me.
Yeah, and also one eye has a positive idea of like when you close the two eyes, the visual eyes, the third eye is one. You know, the regular eyes are two, but the third eye is just a one.
The pineal gland, right, as they call it, or
a lot of people relate that to the idea of because like the chakras kind of occur at different glands in the body. It's interesting.
Now, you know, a lot of this stuff, we don't really know for sure what's going on. A lot of stuff is conjecture, but there are certain common patterns here. So I keep saying there's something going on. Just we're not 100% sure. You know, you talk about some of the non-corporeal entities. I almost feel like it's almost like a car. You know, you buy a Toyota. It's not that powerful, but it'll get you from point A to point B fairly safely. It's very forgiving. You go and buy like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It's a high-end sports car, and it's not forgiving. If you make a mistake in that or steering, it's the same with the horse. You know, some horses, like the ones at the shows that are riding kids, they're very calm and tame. Or a thoroughbred racehorse, it'll kill you if you don't know how to handle it.
I was thrown from a horse as a kid.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
It's scary. No, I mean it's fine, but it's so much power, and you're just a little person. You know.
But I guess I'm making the analogy that that's kind of like dealing with some non-corporeal entities. If you're not properly grounded or your ego isn't right, you're not the right jockey to be riding a thoroughbred racehorse.
And that's what the levels of ritual. That's where the magician will attain more control, where they think, and this gives them the confidence to, you know, if they are standing in the triangle and they manifest in the circle, or you know, like they have someone else look at the scrying mirror while they, you know, there's different ways of trying to control the interaction.
You tell me something. If you were a non-corporeal entity, would you want a human being trying to control you?
Of course not. No.
Right. Would you be willing to work with that human being if it was a cooperative relationship?
Well, if they control legions of humans, you know, like look at Rockefeller. He's there standing with Marina Abramovich in front of a painting titled "Satan Commanding His Legions." I mean, and they're proud, happy to be in front of it. Look at us. They broadcast their evil. They're confident in their evil. They say, look how much power we have because we're working with this level of demons. So like, I mean, you got to believe it, but for me, I mean, you don't really have to believe it. I guess they believe it. You know, the Rockefellers believe it. Marina Abramovich believes it. You know,
I'm an open-minded skeptic. Let's put it that way.
That'll help. That's me too. Me
Well,
too.
one thing I learned in working with the criminally insane, some of these guys were violent murderers, was you can't show any fear. You know,
Right.
no matter how shook up you are, you can't show any fear. You got to
Like a
sit there
predator. Like they're a predator.
yeah,
Yeah.
and staring down. Otherwise, it's like running from a bear or a dog or something. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, they're going to overtake you and squash you. So I remember staring at some of these things. You know, the eyes would change in the patient, and they just become black. And it was like, you know, Anon said, it's like this staring
Right.
contest where it might have gone on for 15 or 30 seconds, but it seemed like forever.
Huh. And you
Yeah.
could tell that it was a different thing in the
Oh, it
person.
was a different, totally.
Right.
There was one patient, he was a meth addict. He was just shaking like a leaf, you know, the whole time he was in the emergency room. And then when, you know, I was interviewing him and asking him questions, and especially questions this entity didn't want me to know the answers to. I mean, he just went stark still, you
Hmm.
know, after
Something
shaking
else took
all night,
control of
something
him.
else took control of him. He went stark
Wow.
still. His eyes got black, like dark pools of
They
cold
changed color.
hatred.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'd never
So that,
experienced cold hatred like that in my life anywhere. I mean, it was
You felt it.
I felt it.
yeah.
It was just
Right.
frigid, cold hatred. It didn't
Wow.
say a word, but the feeling was just overwhelming.
And Sean, I think
SRA. Oh,
I was
go
gonna say,
ahead, please.
one of the reasons I think I survived what I went through, the ordeals too, is I was doing it without being on any type of drugs or recreational medication. You know, I stayed away from the cocaines and all that stuff. I've never tried cocaine in my life, never really wanted to. So I think that was part of my saving grace as well. But it makes it tough because you're confronting these evils and these energies head on.
Yeah.
Right. Right. There's no numbing that you have to encounter and experience all the fear and all the.
Well, if you
Yes.
notice, a lot of the schizophrenics will seek out drugs on their own to try to cope,
To
you
self-medicate,
know,
right?
they
Yeah.
self-medicate. And I've heard a number of times that the voices didn't like marijuana because it kind of calmed people down, you know,
Right. It
and
does
doesn't
have,
have any side effects. But for those who are on the fence, you know, those that are kind of real unstable, it could throw them over.
right. It's another, um, the people that do SRA control with trauma, they also dislike their victims to use cannabis because it breaks down the mind control. It helps the memories pop up, and like it gives it reduces the rigidity of the walls between the separations between the selves. And it's interesting how cannabis is such a healing plant. It's like
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
I mean,
that's why they outlawed it for so long.
exactly
well,
that.
I in my views, I mean, cannabis, I feel it definitely has its place,
Mhm.
but I don't think its place is everywhere either.
That's true.
I think we got to be careful with that.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, you got to
It's
use your
helped.
head.
It's a medicine,
It's helped patients who've had seizures where nothing else has worked too.
yes.
Yeah,
And they can do that without even using the psychoactive part. They can juice the leaf of the cannabis buds. And if you don't light them on fire, then it doesn't become psychoactive. And you can take larger amounts of THC in like a juice of the leaf of the cannabis, and you won't get high. You could drink a tall glass of that and go drive and pick up your kids.
Hmm.
It's magic. This plant, it'll feed us, house us, give us fuel. It'll save everybody.
Or it does that to people that ingest it to make it want more and more of it in some way, so that you'll keep planting it and cultivating and growing it
Oh,
too.
right.
You know,
Like
like
it's a symbiosis. We work for
symbiosis type
it
of thing,
and
right?
it works for us. Right. Yes. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. I love it.
I've seen some people's personalities change being on cannabis over time
Right.
though too. So I mean, like I
Right.
said, I grew up around that stuff. I knew what
Mhm.
Sensimillion was as a 7-year-old kid, for goodness sakes.
Right,
You know,
yeah,
Hawaiian Gold, Nebraska Red.
right. That's great. That's great.
So I mean, I knew
I
all the
think that
language and the lingo.
I think that the alcohol really is the main feed for these things, because
yeah,
it is a depressant, and it causes depression in people if they do it too much in their life.
it
And
does.
so they call it spirits, and
Yeah,
it
they don't
takes
call
the
it that for
soul.
nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's the only one that's legal that we're alled to drink,
yeah.
to have. Like,
Well,
come
it's
on.
got worse effects than that. I mean, for every
Very
ounce you
much.
drink, there's a 10-hour low-key nervous withdrawal that people don't realize that that's going on.
Wow.
So you drink a six-pack, you got 60 hours of a withdrawal of this nervous, jittery effect. And people aren't told that. So they
Right.
project that out to their wives and husbands and kids, and blast them because they feel they're causing the nervous jitteriness. It's a
Yeah.
bad drug.
Oh, alcohol is
Yeah.
much, much worse than cannabis. I'll definitely
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No doubt.
I was just remarking that these same, the satanic eugenicists that run society, they say no on cannabis and yes on alcohol,
Yeah.
and they also run all of that methamphetamine from Mexico. The CIA works with the cartels. Like, it's all one big system of
Yeah.
like flooding people's homes and destroying their childhood, destroying the parents.
Right.
It's a
Right.
one big machine.
Fentanyl too. I mean,
Right,
if
fentanyl
they
from China, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
they caught some CIA agents here in Arizona smuggling, 300 pounds of cocaine, I think, across the
right.
border,
That's
and
where all the
and
cocaine comes from. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
they couldn't do anything. They had the badges and stuff, and their boss stuck up for them. And then when the
Wow.
sheriff went to investigate it, it's like, what are you talking about?
Huh.
Mm,
So the feds just drove away with it, and the sheriff couldn't do
Yeah,
anything.
he couldn't do anything.
Wow. Yeah. See, it's and that so that's why the non-corporeal demons will work with certain humans, because those humans have control over other humans, legions of them. That's what gives them their ranking in the hierarchy. So people that work their way up into government, they prove their immorality through doing devious things that can lead to blackmail, and that gives them their spot in the government. Like Dennis Hastert was a just deplorable pedophile for his entire life, and he was the longest sitting speaker of the house. It's they're rewarded. The evil ones are rewarded and placed where they
Yeah, they are.
can control others. So the evil is encouraged by these demon voices, and the humans accept them and willingly contract, and it leads them into a hellish realm, I'm sure. But while they're here in the material world, they're rewarded with money, and they're given they please the higher ups, and they get you know their little bit of spending cash. And same thing with the
It's a craving
demons.
for power while in this material realm.
Right.
Yeah.
And
You know,
power only comes from obedience to authority. And really, like, God gave us free will. Everyone has free will. And we always have a choice to choose love instead of fear. That's I think that's why they hate us, because they don't
Yeah.
have that anymore. They have to
they don't
follow
have
orders.
creativity. They lack creativity.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I guess the divine spark too, because I mean, get into all the different, what Crowley says and what Paladin says about the divine spark and everything, and
Right.
what occurred with the fall of Sophia. I mean, there's lots of different perspectives and interpretations of that.
Right.
So, as far as authority goes, I mean, I guess there's authority that is deserving of respect. I mean, I will respect authority if I feel they're deserving of it. I
Right.
mean, here's a
But you
metaphysical
get to
question for you.
choose. You choose to obey or not every time. So you choose with your free will that's given by God to I like this thing. I will go along with that. So like my son follows what I say because he loves me, and there's that kind of like I am an authority in his life. But ultimately he chooses what he does. He can make a mess on the floor and I can tell him no, but it's still God gave us all that ability. So when you have love and respect for another thing, you can choose to go along with it, but it's still your choice. You retain
Right.
that every time.
Is God
Yeah.
an authority? Here's a metaphysical question for you.
Uh,
Is God an authority?
I think you choose if I think that God created the this is my own personal ideas or whatever, but I believe that God created the system and the method and the like the matrix, and it like I get to choose where I land with my own choices because of my free will. So like God uh God gives me the ability to do good or bad. This is a duality. This realm has duality, and And I think that God doesn't take a place, like God is experiencing through me. Maybe I'm a fractal piece of that consciousness,
Yeah. Yeah.
Fragment.
Yes, yes.
So do not
That's
comply with what you don't believe in.
right. Yeah, and make sure and because maybe some non-corporeal demon could say, hey, I'm God, obey me, and you're like, oh, whoops,
Oh, they've done that.
yeah,
The voices have done that.
yeah,
Actually told people that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got to
So
use your critical thinking skills just to try and be decent human beings.
that's
Whatever,
right.
whatever religious path you follow, God doesn't really care. It really comes down to, are you trying to be a decent human being the best you can, given the
Right.
tools that you have available to you? That's what it
Yeah.
comes
Right.
down to.
Yeah.
Being good
Yeah.
when you can.
Don't
Yeah.
cause suffering. Yeah. Resonate with love. Yeah. That's the
Exactly.
answers. Yeah. This is beautiful. This is so Chanubis, uh this is who it was, and this is the most amazing story I've ever heard. I'm so thankful that,
It's a pretty
that you
good one.
told us about your experience of Chanubis.
Oh, you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Jerry, for connecting us and being here
Oh,
again.
no,
And
no problem. People
thank
need to hear this.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Anon, for sharing this and being here. I hope to continue having contact with you, and maybe we can have further engagement and talk about what you think, or how other experiences that you've had that you didn't mention here today.
Oh, I'd
And
definitely like to do that. And if I may do a quick plug, I did write a book
please,
based on some
yes,
of these experiences. It's
wonderful.
called Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10. I don't know if that's showing up as a mirror image, the title,
I
or
see it.
not.
Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10.
And
Un-
it talks a little bit about my experiences, but it's more of a personal journey for anybody who's searching for God or their soul, or is trying to find some answer. This is a little bit of part of my search, and this is written over about 25 to 30 years. I mean, it took a while to write it. There's a lot in here. It's a heavy read, but I feel it's a good read. And I'll send you a link to my website, so that if you're in the show notes, you can put that there. And if your
I
viewing
will.
audience wants to investigate it, they just click on the link and it'll take them to my website.
That is beautiful.
Okay. I got one here too that Sherry Sweeney and I wrote. Now, Sherry was also heard voices, and
That's
she was the
and
co-author with this.
for the listeners that aren't watching, an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, breaking the spell of the ivory tower by Jerry Marzinsky and Sherry Sweeney. Yeah,
You can get that on our website at jerrymarzinsky.com, or it's on Amazon with a fairly high rating. So
that's
if you
great.
want to know more about the psychotic voices and how we came to determine that these things were entities and not hallucinations, and it also gives a summary of the psychiatric mafia and their history of treating mental illness, which was barbaric for the most part.
Yes, it's very informative, and it gave me a lot of understanding that connected a lot of pieces, and um, it's I'm just so thankful that you guys are here and sharing all of this information, and it's really informing me, and I'm understanding things from a different place, and then recognizing what it's the same of what you're saying from your end of your reality, and we're finding truth from different angles, and it's great to have these conversations, and I very much look forward to more. I hope to speak with both of you again soon. um, uh, is, is there anything else that we didn't say that needs to be said again, or spoken
Well,
about? Did we
just in
forget
line with
anything?
the title of your show, people are waking up to this. The dead are
Yeah.
waking up.
That's right.
Yep, they're waking
Yes.
up. And,
God bless you.
due to people like Anon there, it takes a lot of courage to come out and say this and be that open and honest. There's a lot of people out there who've had some experience, a lot of experience with that. They don't want any part of you know this, and a lot of them are still
Right.
working. They don't want to risk that.
Right.
Um,
Well, hey,
if I was still working, I wouldn't be doing this. They'd gut
yeah.
me.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, I'm just a regular guy. I work at a factory. I don't have any commercials. I don't work for anybody else. It's just, I am interested, and I want to speak to you guys, and I'm so thankful that you're sharing with me, and I'm trying to spread it as much and far and wide as I can. And I'm very I'm just glad to be here and a part of this.
Well, it's
thank you
people
so
like
much.
you that are going to make the difference, because this isn't, you're not going to convince the psychiatric mafia or psychiatry or psychology or the institution. This has to come up from the bottom, from people who've experienced this and saying, this is not the truth. What they've told us is not the truth, and it doesn't work.
Sean, you're helping us get the word out, and we thank you for that.
Yes.
Well, anything
yeah.
I can do, I'm honored, and thank you. So let's do this again. Let's, if you have any ideas, if you have any thoughts that you're thinking, you are always welcome to Wake the Dead. We love to hear your input and what you have rolling around in your mind, because sharing that and our inspiration and our creative thoughts is really what inspires and the creative thoughts of others. And it's like a spark that lights a fire in others.
Okay.
I love it.
I'll
You.
keep that in mind. I run into some interesting characters.
Yeah, please bring them along. We love this. This
Okay.
is great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for having us.
Well, it's my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you both again. And thank you all for listening to Wake the Dead.